right, so we're talking to the business owners out there, and there's a moment in time, hopefully, maybe it's one that you've been anticipating, maybe it's one that you've been planning for, but there's going to be a moment where you might receive an offer for someone to purchase your company. And if you haven't done this before, today's episode is for you, because here we have two certified financial planners, Jeremiah joining me as a California licensed attorney with a strong background in mergers and acquisitions. And so we're going to kind of pepper him with some questions about what is the step-by-step process that is recommended when you receive that offer to buy your company.
Yeah, this is great. I'm excited about these. I've walked through with a lot of business owners when they get this first offer. Some of it just kicks the deal starting. We need to bring in a banker and do a whole system to get the best offer. Others, they say, yeah, it's a great handshake type structure and let's walk through a deal. And it's a really fun thing to get excited about, but there's also, it's a minefield to walk through. So we're going to talk through some of the goods and bads.
Ideally, there's more than one offer, right? It's always great to have, what do they say, two birds in the hand, or one bird in the hand better than two?
In the
Correct
bush.
me, what do I say?
Yeah. No, but to in essence, have a market, have multiple options, oftentimes we will negotiate multiple letters of intent all at the same time, trying to maximize each deal. Hey, if we would get this buyer, this is the key points they're going to work on. Hey, if that's this one. It allows you to keep them a little honest, right? They know they're not the only one. You have a couple of offers, but such a great position. We can have multiple offers there and you can get a lot of, not just concessions, but really reasonable
Leverage.
deal terms. Yeah.
Yep.
Right.
Leverage. Well, let's dive in. Let's all stop with the cliches and have a little bit more coffee this morning. No, I'm kidding. But so what really happens? Like you said, it might have just been kind of a handshake. Let's say you're out on the golf course. Let's say it's a friend of yours. Let's say it's a competitor that is finally looking to, they're younger than you. They know that you're anticipating retirement or some sort of succession plan, and they approach you. So this is someone that's familiar, and they make an offer. Right? What are some of just like the first like knee-jerk reactions that you see, and what would you recommend in that moment?
Yeah. Sometimes business owners aren't even ready to think about that, right? The idea that I would exit, the idea that I would sell, like, I don't even know what that feels like. I don't even know what I do, and so sometimes there's the personal, what would I be about? Am I able to separate and sell my business? I know a lot of entrepreneurs that's the goal from the day one, they want to sell it. So they're building to sell. Others, they're building to run this for the rest of their lives. And the idea of selling feels like a part of themselves, like almost their child. Like, how could I sell that? But I think there's an initial personal reaction. And then the second is finding out, like, is this in the ballpark? And there's really an awkward moment right at the beginning. They say, hey, I'd buy this. And maybe they even give you a price. But most business owners don't really have a good sense at that moment. Is that a fair price? Is that a low price? Are they really looking to buy my business? Is this just like a espionage, like information grab? Do they just want to like go through a deal and get a look at my operations and get a look at my customer list and then, oh, sorry, deal's not going to work, and compete with me? There's some protectionist, there's some opportunity. There's even thoughts within your own company of like, well, what about that guy I've been grooming or that gal I've been grooming to take over? Am I okay to sell? Do I want to keep them? So there's a lot that kind of goes in that moment. And often what I tell people is, there's no agreeing to anything. It's just saying, wow, that's really interesting. I'd be interested in pursuing that and talking more, if you were.
Mm-hmm.
And then to start getting, a lot happens, I think, behind the scenes to get those wheels started to get you ready for a sale.
Yeah, so it's not the moment to be too quick and too open-handed, because both it can have an impact. I thought that was interesting what you said to your current staff. If they sense or hear rumors that you're considering selling when really they've been anticipating an opportunity to take on ownership in the company, like that can have a huge impact on your operations. So kind of keep it close to your chest. And I think that, at the next moment when you kind of recognize like, okay, this is a serious offer, and whether they've put a price tag next to it or just somebody has entered into kind of a round two of the conversation, this is kind of a moment to get the support team around you, get the resources around you, so that you make sure that you're walking into this. And so maybe take some time to talk about the differences in the type of offers, a strategic offer versus a financial offer from a potential buyer. And how do you kind of form, quote unquote, the dream team that you need to walk through the process?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think there's a lot of different pieces. The piece that we sit in, initially is, what do you need from this business? Do you need the stream of income? Is that really valuable to you? If that converted into a lump sum, is that okay also? How big does it need to be? Is this a legacy for your family? kind of in the personal planning side. Is this going to be okay? We have a client that we worked with that he had built and it was running 4 different car washes. And he had talked about, maybe selling his businesses and exiting all these car washes. And so he didn't know, like, is this enough? So what we did is first we did his personal plan and to say, hey, if you can liquidate all these car washes, you give up all the income, you give up that stream of income and you just turn it into a lump sum of money. How much does it need to be to fund your whole future? All the things you might ever want to do to never need to have a money enterprise again. And so we did that math and then we came up with a number and then we compared to what they were worth on the market and each of them combined together was worth well more than what he needed. And so it was a really good moment of saying, oh, if I go through this, it's not like even tight. Like I'll have plenty of money to live my life. There's
Yeah.
others where we've done the math and it's the other way around to say, even if you sold these and got top dollar, you're not ready. Like you have
So
not paid off
you're kind of
mortgages.
establishing the floor as you enter into these negotiations. What is like the bare minimum that would actually make this an interesting offer? And I love your comment about it really all flows into a personal plan. If you don't have a personal sense of your plan, I'm thinking about another client who went through a merger recently and there was negotiations about whether or not he stays on as a key employee and so retains a salary for a certain amount of time period going forward. And that all had to be peppered into his plan. Well, could I retire if the buyout was big enough? Could I retire? Do I want to? Then there's the emotional aspect. Do I want to? Am I ready to retire? Do I want to do something else? So really having that personal plan, financial plan in place as you enter into the negotiations, because bottom line, baseline, here's my non-negotiables as you
Yep.
enter in.
Yeah. And even that aspect, I mean, so many entrepreneurs, the reason they run their own businesses is they're not great at working for other people. And they don't want to be great at that. They've spent their whole career leading the charge and making quick decisions. And we had a client who sold years ago when I was at the law firm, sold his business. And part of the deal was he would stay on for a couple of years to help the transition. And we, as the attorneys, made sure that his compensation for selling his business was totally disconnected from his ongoing work as an employee because we want him to be able to walk away with all of his money. But then if he keeps working for him, sure, he gets a salary that's very reasonable. Well, he was about 6 months in and the factory needed a new piece of equipment. So he just bought it, $10,000, charged it on the card, brought it in. And, corporate called him and slapped him on the wrist and said, you can't just buy something. He's like, well, we needed it. We would have been down for 3 days if we didn't just buy this thing now. And then he didn't last. He ended up terminating and saying, I can't work here. Because he's used to doing that, the speed of an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
So just a story. But I think first I would say getting that personal plan, knowing what your numbers need to be, not just what's it worth, but really what do I need? What am I about?
Right.
And then we
Right.
start looking at the actual deal. Often there's an attorney, a mergers acquisitions attorney, someone who knows usually in that industry, whatever industry you're in. If you're a law firm, if you're a manufacturing company, if you're a tech company, somebody who has experience in that field, knowing what some of the reps and warranties, knowing what some of the unique aspects are going to be in your industry. So that's key. And then some sort of a CPA or financial advisor on the tax side to understand, hey, when I sell this, and those two need to work together. Because if you were to do a stock sale, which people kind of heard about, you sell the stock in a company, you get one tax treatment. If instead you do what's called an asset sale, the company that you're running sells all the assets out of it, that's a very different tax treatment. There's no better or worse. They're just different. And so understanding what the differences are, what a buyer might want, what a seller might want. And
Ignorance is
then,
not bliss in that case scenario
yeah,
is all that
ignorance
I
is
would
not
add
bliss.
to that.
Well,
It's definitely going to be well
absolutely.
informed.
And the upgrade there a little bit even is to say, if it's an industry partner, they're looking to work with you, they understand the operations. If it's private equity, a private equity group who's coming in to buy you, they would gladly take your shirt and everything else they could, right? They're there to make a profit. And so you have to be real mindful that, you need to protect yourself and get fair value because they'll pay fair value. They'll pay you the money. But if you don't ask for it or you're willing to take less, they will absolutely, take things off
Yeah.
the table if they could.
And I think too, just to pause, like as you're forming this team, I think on the opposite end, you're talking about private equity coming in that's got a lot of knowledge, a lot of experience, and they would take advantage of you if you didn't know, right, how to do this process. But I think that there's other circumstances too where it does feel like just a friendly deal and a handshake and somebody that you know well. And so you might be reluctant to have a team or add in these resources. But again, ignorance is not bliss. And it comes down to kind of personal protection of your taxes, your personal financial plan. And I always like to say clear is kind. So making sure that you have all the terms, negotiated, all the terms spelled out, because you just never know what's going to happen as you're walking through this deal process. So would
Right.
still
And
recommend, no matter the sophistication of the deal, to get a solid team in place.
Yeah. And I always advise that people get an attorney in place. And I would much rather do a deal opposite an experienced attorney than either no attorney or someone who is someone's cousin and says, "Oh, I can help out."
Yep.
Even though it might be harder, it gets to the point so much faster. I think experienced attorneys in this space, they're there to get deals done. They're there to represent their clients, and even if they cost a little more per hour, the amount of hours and the ease at which they'll cut through the complexity is so much better. So understanding how that's going to come out to you, understanding theirs. And then the fun part, you get your team in place, you got this offer, and then we start talking about what's next. And usually it's letter of intent is where we're getting towards. But man, this is a fun moment. Some people, like you said, Laura, they met on the golf course, they kind of shook hands and, hey, I'd be interested in this. And that's as far as they want to take it. They like the number, they like the price, it makes sense, they got their team, let's move forward. Sometimes that works. Other times we say, hey, that's a great offer. However, is it the best offer? Is it what somebody else would still offer? And so that's when an investment banker becomes really valuable.
Mm.
What investment bankers do is they stir up interest. And so if you have one buyer that you want to go with them, you're really confident in the price, you probably don't need an investment banker. If you say, hey, it's a good offer, but I have no idea if there's another company out there that would pay double that. I have no idea if this is a fair value. An investment banker is well worth the commission and well worth what they bring in if they're going to get you more money or even just the confidence that this is the best offer. Another story about a client that was looking to sell his business, brought in an investment banker. They got a whole market going, got 4 or 5 or more interested buyers. We whittled those down to the top few. And what ended up being the winning bid was actually an overseas company that had been looking to get into the US. It was a kind of a cleaning type manufacturing type company. They've been looking to get to the US and they've been unsuccessful in launching their own brand. So now was a moment for them to say they're not just buying this company, they're actually buying into the US market to give themselves a footprint. And so they were looking at the whole
Willing
US
to pay a
market.
premium.
So they were willing to pay a premium. They're publicly traded overseas, had plenty of money to come in and buy this. And it was not something that would have been on this client's radar. But because they used an investment banker to kind of stir up the market and get a number of buyers, one of them happened to be this overseas team. And so, often you'll get multiple LOIs if you go that route, and then you want to negotiate each one. Let's maximize each deal. And they're going to be a little different. This one wants you to work for 2 years. This one wants to have an earnout over the next 5 years before you get your money. This one's all cash up front, no questions asked. And a lot of times we're looking at who's going to be the best fit for the future, for the employees, who's really going to be able to close this deal. And then, of course, who's the highest number? What's the best deal? And then so that's kind of that process and riding multiple horses, kind of.
Mm-hmm.
But then once you get to a point where you've picked one, whether it was the first one who you met on the golf course or it was one you never heard of, often when you sign that letter of intent, there's an exclusivity provision that says, hey, you can't talk to anybody else. And that's anywhere from very, very large deals to very, very tiny deals. And there's a moment where you say, hey, you and me, we're going to work together. We're going to try and get a deal accomplished. And then
And within, isn't there typically kind of like a timestamp there? Like we're going to enter into exclusivity for a certain period of time. And that's why some deals, frankly, it's not that they come to an odd end. It's just that the time has lapsed. They're not able to come to terms within the time frame that they've set out. And so the deal kind of goes stale, right? Or
Yep,
gets a little bit tired. And it might spin up again later. But so just to recap, the dream team would be to have an M&A attorney, someone that has experience in mergers and acquisitions, hopefully on both sides, a CPA, investment banker if you're looking for multiple offers, or a valuation expert. Either way, you want to get a keen sense of what the valuation is for your company.
Mm-hmm.
And then a personal wealth advisor. And that's where we come in, right? Where we sit down and make sure that at the end of the deal, it's benefiting your future for the purpose that you want it to. And so this is kind of leads me to my next question, which is like, so let's say that the price tag is something more than what you've ever anticipated. It's 10 times what you were expecting. Let's say it's on the positive side. Don't get too excited too fast because there's a lot that comes into play between the gross and the net, right? And so let's talk about some of those negotiations regarding not only what the offer includes, but how do you actually derive like the net value that's going to come to you?
That's right. That's so good. And so for us, often when we look at it like a deal, we got a term sheet, we will be looking, what's the initial price? And then what's the structure for taxes? Is it an asset sale? Is it a stock sale? And so that gives us some insight into what tax liabilities are going to be coming through. Often for entrepreneurs, look at this opportunity to what's called a rollover, where they, instead of receiving just the cash out, they'll be able to take some of their ownership and roll it into the new company. And in doing that, they defer those taxes. So say it was let's use some numbers here, but say it was a $10 million deal. They're selling the business for 10 million. And the other party says, yeah, we'd love it if you rolled over 30%, meaning that you receive, a little bit over $7 million, or I guess roughly $7 million coming to you, but 3 million roughly rolls into the new company. So you become a shareholder in the new company. The benefit of doing that is you only get taxed on that 7 million. So you've avoided some of those taxes, even though there's value there.
And potentially the reinvestment and the rollover could prove an even higher multiple. You could get an added benefit in doing that.
That's right. And that's the main reason. They say, hey, I believe in the future of this company that's adding together other businesses. I want to be a shareholder there. But that may or may not fit your plan. And that's a really important piece to look at. Like if you're going to live off of that money, well, then you definitely can't roll it over. So there's that question of there. Then there's also I guess I'd say the liability contingencies of, if you sell the business, often there's a whole indemnity section, kind of a big legal word, and also a section on reps and warranties. And those all fit together. But in that, there's still some liability for the seller. It's like selling a car. You can kick the tires, you can check the engine, you can see how much gas is in the tank, and then the new buyer takes it over. Well, same thing as a business. They can check the vendor agreements, they can meet with the staff, they can see how much working capital cash is in the bank
Right.
to
Survey
see
the
if it.
clients, right? If it's a service oriented industry, like how happy are your clients? How likely are they to stay on, right?
Yeah. And so as they do that, there's certain things that you just can't discover yourself. And so that's what they do the reps and warranties for. You tell them, hey, I've never dumped waste on the ground. I've never done some of these things. They just couldn't tell by seeing. And if after you sell the business, as they're going about operating the new business, they realize actually we opened this lid and there was all this waste you've been dumping into the ground and we have this giant claim for remediation. Well, all that's going to flow back to the seller. So in that, there has to be often there's escrows, there's holdbacks, there's contingencies. So when you talk about the net, most of the deals I've ever worked on, there's a amount at closing that you get. It feels like a big amount. But then a year or two later, there's an escrow that's released. Maybe a little bit after that, there's an earnout that's finalized. So there's multiple streams of income, and those are all taxed different ways. And the part that we jump at is as we kind of calculate that net in the deal, I think then the ultimate net is saying, okay, as this lands to me personally, as this money comes out of the business, it gets to my personal balance sheet. Is there any other sort of like personal financial planning that needs to be done in this year as opposed to other years? So the big one that jumps to mind for a lot of our clients is charitable giving. They realize in this 1 year, I'm selling my business, my taxes are just enormous. And they say, well, I give on a regular basis. I'd like to give maybe some out of the deal, but we'll do the calculations. Say you're in your highest tax brackets this year. Whereas in future years, you'll be in much lower tax brackets.
Right.
So the benefit of donations in the future is actually less than they could be today. And so we'll calculate maybe the next 10 years of giving and accelerate that all into this year and give a much larger amount than they were planning to, but do it into something like a donor advised fund. And that
Right.
allows them in the future to liberate those resources to these charities, but is a really strategic way to pre-fund your charitable giving, but also get the best write-off you can in that year. And those types of strategies, they're not for everybody, but there's a number of things like that on the personal side that we want, like you said, that net. Once we know how the money's coming to you, now how do we most efficient with it to fulfill all your hopes and dreams?
Yep. And there are some other tax maneuvers and things that we take a look at. And our goal is never to not pay the taxes owed, but how do we minimize and overall the tax liability in those moments because you're going to have an unsteady stream of income, whether or not you take one bite of the apple or multiple bites of the apple, so to speak. And so that's where that kind of personal plan comes into place because if you have some forethought, there's ways to truly minimize tax liability for yourself and your household. So the other key levers and things that they look at, I know you talked about this, is recurring revenue, maybe a growth rate on your company, customer concentration in specific geographic territories. So there's lots of different aspects to the deal and to the offer being made. So don't just take it at face value. Make sure that it's evaluated with your dream team, right, to get the real numbers. I want to comment too a little bit about the timeline. Every deal is a little bit different, but I don't know if I've ever experienced, and you can too, where a quick offer is the best offer, right? So don't speed up the process just because you feel anxious or simply you want to be on the other side. This is a moment in time to be thoughtful, to be strategic. it's not just a simple handshake moment, right? You need to prepare yourself for a long, technical, strategic process that, if done well, can benefit yourself and multiple people, your staff and everybody else.
Right. But give a
Yeah.
little context. I've not seen deals close in 30 days, right? There's just
Hmm.
too much to really negotiate and get squared away and get clarity on in order to be able to close in 30 days. 45 days, 60 days, 90 days, absolutely. That happens all the time. It doesn't have to be a drawn out, 6-month process or year-long process. Generally, there's even a desire to keep the momentum up. And you say deals can go stale. So to say, hey, once we sign an LOI, you've got 45 days to get through all the due diligence. And then after that's done, we have 30 days to draft in all the documents, and then we're closing. Like that's a very normal timeline of, we need to give space for this to get done, but we don't need it to drag
Yeah. So just to wrap up our time, there's a lot more details I
up.
know included in an acquisition or a merger for that matter. But just I think three key takeaways that I find from our talk is make sure that you understand your buyer and their offer, build your dream team or your expert team carefully, and make sure that you have a financial plan in place that goes beyond the sale of your company so that you really know what terms you're trying to negotiate. Any other key takeaways you want to
Yeah, this is an
call
exciting
out?
part. And I think one thing I see a lot of folks is they get emotionally, they could sell the business before they've sold it. And then the idea of
Mm,
going back to work and if the deal's going to fall apart, they just don't know what to do. Makes them really vulnerable to hard negotiations, to giving up money, leaving things on the table. So it's really a moment of being excited about the prospect, but also acknowledging, hey, this is my business. I could keep running this. So almost having to hold both of those at the same time while you get through the deal. It's not done until it's done, but allowing yourself to on a healthy side, emotionally migrate to being ready to sell, but also not doing that so fast that you were just desperate to sell and you couldn't imagine another year in this business. So it's a real interesting moment that we get to sit in with entrepreneurs of, it's a great, exciting moment. We also kind of have to protect your emotions a little bit until it's closed, until it's done. And then you can kind of feel that relief. There's a lot of emotions that go into this, and we were excited to walk through all that together with our
yeah,
clients.
good wisdom there. Well, so to all of our business owner listeners, we hope this was helpful, or share it with somebody who you think it might be helpful with. And thanks so much for listening. We have a few more things to let you know about before we go. Podcast reviews really help us to serve more people and get this information into the hands of the people who need it. Please leave us a review. Even if it's not 5 stars, we welcome the feedback.
And we invite you to let us know what topics you would like to hear more about, or what would benefit the people in your life who you're closest to. We have more resources online. Those resources are designed to help you share this great information easily with people in your life. To access those resources, please visit tricordadvisors.com.
Often we hear from clients that they wish they had talked to us sooner. If that's you, we'd be thrilled to see how financial planning can benefit your life. Email us at contact@tricordadvisors.com or simply click on the link in the show notes.
This show was produced by Graham Gardner at Model FA. Find out more about how to create a podcast for your financial planning business by visiting modelfa.com. We love creating content that's useful, resourceful, and maybe even a little entertaining. We want to make this mega universe of financial topics and advice applicable and helpful to your life.
Remember, at Tricord Advisors, we are your future's best ally.